Joining us, I guess, momentarily then is Madina Touré. There. Madina, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Everybody, Madina Touré is an education reporter covering New York City for Politico magazine. Madina, thanks so much for returning to the show.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Bill de Blasio has put forward in terms of an idea of cutting the NYPD a little bit and redirecting it into education. But before we get there, can you just give us like a broader budget picture? Like how much money goes into education in New York City? How much money goes to the police and so on?
Right. So, right now, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Right now is a really interesting times in terms of budget conversations. I mean, the Department of Education could see something like $262 million in cuts to their budget. I know that there's a lot of, concern about that. And the NYPD currently has this $6 billion budget. What the city council is proposing is to cut $1 billion from that. This is really a response to all the protests that have been going on for the last few weeks. People have been calling for, for the NYPD's budget to be cut so that money could be used for other things like hiring social workers and guidance counselors. And so there's definitely been a big focus on that. So far, the mayor has said that, he said recently that he kind of made a commitment to shifting funding from the NYPD to youth initiatives and social services. He mentioned that he didn't really specify a specific amount yet. He said that's kind of being worked out right now in the budget process. He mentioned that there were going to be some town halls in like areas that have had high levels of police interactions with residents. And I think some cure violence providers are going to be participating in that. So that's a little bit about what's happening there.
So, and how explicit? So on the city council, it's getting a little bit more specific. They're talking about $1 billion, and are they being really clear too that they're not like, this isn't all of a sudden, hey, maybe $500 million is just going to go into like the rainy day fund or making cuts. Like, this is $1 billion. We have it, and we're going to redirect it materially to other socially productive things. Are they being really clear about that, at least in the city council?
Right. So far what they've said is that, so again, they want to cut $1 billion from the NYPD's upcoming budget. That amount represents something like 16% of their $6 billion budget. They've made, some proposals like slashing overtime costs across the board, removing the school safety division from the NYPD's purview, reducing the head count. They haven't really indicated, which agencies would benefit from the cuts. I know a lot of people are saying the Department of Education should be receiving that money, so it kind of remains to be seen where that's going to go exactly. But I do think it is worth noting that the council did, most of the council, with the exception of Councilmember Inez Barron, they did vote to increase the police force by over 1,000 cops. And I think a lot of activists like Josmar Trujillo from the Coalition to End Broken Windows have brought that up. And some have said, well, we should get back the money that went into that. So it does remain to be seen which agencies are going to benefit from those cuts, but definitely all eyes are on the Department of Education. There's been a lot of calls to, hire more social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists. So I think that's definitely one area that everyone's going to be watching.
When you talk about the council votes, can you give us a sense, as best you can? Obviously you might know some of the conversations that happen behind closed doors. You're a really good reporter. But in terms of like Inez Barron and I think it's Charles Barron is her husband's name. This is like a very distinct political couple in New York. They have serious political commitments, and they've both in terms of city politics and state politics have definitely for a very long time highlighted racism, gentrification, inequality, police violence. And so there is a real there is some connection there to, organic movements and protests that have moved, kind of moved across the city and are still ongoing. When you look at the kind of rest of the council, and I guess up through the mayor, of this kind of interesting dynamic where there's a lot of desire to hop on board with different trendy kind of discourses. But maybe the voting record doesn't match that. And also there might be a much more like, just taking de Blasio himself, and I'm trying to be careful here because this is such an opinion-driven show, but I'm trying to take it out of the realm of opinion. But like, there's been a lot of very interesting writing on particularly recently, there was a piece in Jacobin about how sort of, even when he agrees with activists, he doesn't like that they're doing what they're doing. And I'm wondering, whatever it may be. And I'm wondering when you look at the kind of contradictions, with the exception of Inez Barron on the city council, like, how are they filtering that to the press? Like, how are they saying, yeah, we were voting for all this stuff, but now this is happening. So is it people are out taking enormous risks, so we're listening? Or is it, hey, this was actually always really our position?
Right. I know. I definitely think it's a good question, and that's why I mentioned that before. I mean, I think one thing that continues to be striking, and I mentioned like activists like Joe Smart Trujillo from the Coalition to End Broken Windows, who keep mentioning that. And even at the time when they did it, he was among people who was criticizing that. It is striking that most of the council, with the exception of Councilmember Inez Barron, did vote to increase the force. I do remember at one point being at a forum on broken windows where some activists had kind of taken elected officials to task over that. And they were saying, well, there were certain things we were promised that didn't happen. And, we did this because of X, Y, Z. I think it seems to me now like a lot of these elected officials are responding to the moment. I mean, I think the protests have been they've been going on for weeks, and people have been going out all over the city. And, it's gotten to the point where people realize that they do have to respond because of the actions of protesters. I know that the chair of the city council's education committee, Mark Traeger, and Donovan Richards, who heads the public safety committee, they kind of put out a statement recently saying that they want to see the school safety agents removed from the purview of the NYPD. And that was interesting. There's some council members, I think Vanessa Gibson and Corey Johnson, some others who also, they were the ones who announced the $1 billion in cuts, the proposal to make that cut to the NYPD budget. I think a lot of them are kind of responding to what's happening out in the streets. But there are council members who are more on the conservative side, and not even just the ones who are Republican. There is kind of a group of conservative Democrats in the city council who are not as, probably don't have the position of like, get the cops out of the schools and like cut the NYPD budget. So there's a little bit of nuance there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think a lot of these elected officials respond to the moment, and even what you're seeing with the current and former staffers for the mayor who are going out and protesting, and who wrote this open letter. I think it's just a sign that like something I think even though this has happened before, I think Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, all of that happening has kind of changed the dynamic, and all of that happening with the pandemic, disproportionately impacting Black and Latinx communities, all that coming together has kind of changed things. And even some former top de Blasio staffers like Rich Beery and Maya Wiley also kind of speaking out about this issue of changing, the role that school safety agents play in schools. So I think across the board, and even the mayor, I mean, he hasn't given a specific dollar figure, and he has said that he thinks school safety agents should still remain under the NYPD, but he did commit to shifting the funding. I think the chancellor, I was listening to a town hall that the chancellor was having with Community Education Council 14 in Brooklyn yesterday, and somebody asked him about that, like, do you support, changing the role of school safety agents, divesting.
Sorry, what are school safety agents? What does that mean?
Right. Right. So school safety agents, these are the officers that are in the schools.
And these are NYPD fully,
Yes,
like,
they're all under the purview of the
yep.
NYPD. And so basically, they're the people like the security guards, the people who like check the students in, who are at the doors and everything. And so yeah, and I mean, I think to kind of expand upon that, there have been calls to get school safety agents out of the schools for a while, but I think, of course, with everything that has happened, those conversations are being reignited. There's some people who are saying take them out completely. Some people say just reduce them, and some people are saying, well, why should this be under the purview of the NYPD? There are certain issues that should be handled by social workers, by guidance counselors, by school psychologists. So there's been a really interesting conversation there. It seems like the mayor wants to keep things in their current form. The chancellor at the town hall I mentioned yesterday, he was saying that he's currently, he didn't take a position, but he did say that he's, studying the issue, how it came to be that school safety agents, became under the purview of the NYPD. So there's a lot of interesting conversations that are happening across the board.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.